It is indeed time for The World This Week, 7 days for Paris-based correspondents. And with us this week, Marcus Mabry of the International Herald Tribune, Dana Harman of Israeli newspaper Haaretz, Judah Grunstein of World Politics Review, and Régis Le Sommier of French weekly news magazine Paris Match. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for weighing in on the conversation throughout the week on the World This Week Facebook page and on Twitter, where our handle is @François F24. We're going to begin with the grim news out of Syria. The attention on the international stage has been moving. We'll talk about it, from the Arab League to the Security Council in New York. This, though, the scene inside of Syria. Another Friday of defiance, the bloody standoff getting bloodier. Activists claim several dozen killed over 2 days, like here in the suburbs of Damascus. And the head of the Arab League Observer Mission, noting that cities of Homs, Hama, Idlib, all witnessing a very high escalation in violence since Tuesday. Now, speaking of Idlib, France 24's Karim Hakiki and Adel Gastel went undercover into the outskirts of that city, to a town called Binish, near the Turkish border, to meet members of the burgeoning Free Syrian Army.
Tell me how your lives are here.
We defend ourselves, thanks to God, thanks to our weapons, and thanks to our will. But we only have small arms like AK-47s, that's all.
And what weapons do the security forces have?
They have tanks, they have heavy artillery and submachine guns. They have planes.
So how did you liberate your city then?
Thanks to God, we stayed united. That's how we resisted, with simple assault rifles.
Karim and Adel, they've just crossed the border into Turkey. We'll be seeing more of their footage as they return. Judah Grunstein, we've been talking about 9 months now, and we're wondering, is this going to escalate into civil war? It seems now, more and more, when you hear him casually speak about Kalashnikovs there, what's your reaction?
Well, I think that there have always been people who have said, who have seen this as a short-term crisis, whether Assad was going to crush the resistance or fall. But that's always been more of a minority view. I think the people that have really have a familiarity with everything on the ground have expected this to be a drawn-out crisis, a drawn-out confrontation. I don't think the outcome is necessarily determined yet. But it seems like all sides of the conflict are weakened, but at the same, and so there can't really be any decisive outcome right now. But it looks more and more likely like that it will move towards a civil war. The question really, in terms of the opposition, is that it's very divided, and it's not very clear how much of the opposition actually wants to take up arms. There are certain factions within the opposition that do not want it to devolve into a civil war.
That's one of the confusing points. Western journalists forced to go undercover if they want to report the real news inside of Syria. So we don't know exactly who's shooting at who and who's pulling the strings.
Well, that was exactly what, the terrible tragedy that happened to Gilles Jacquier was, with the outcome.
French TV news journalist.
Yes. A couple of weeks ago is a clear example of we don't know who's shooting at who. Because first it was said that might have been some mortar shells, thrown at the journalist by like there was some sort of setup by the government who was making, this convoy was taking journalists into Homs at that point, and eventually it turns out that it could be mortar shell coming from the rebels. And what was interesting in the more global perspective on Syria, on that terrible thing that happened to our colleague, is that it showed that even within Homs, which has been pointed as a main rebel stronghold, well, there is a part that is held by the Alawites, who are in favor of the regime. So it's split within the cities, and we can even think, in other cities that you have the same problem, and you have a problem that is a wider problem in the Syrian society. Is you have a country that is made out of several pieces, out of several communities, and those communities have different interests. And so to go now and say, okay, the Bashar al-Assad regime is corrupted and it's gonna crumble just like Gaddafi did. It's not quite the same. The question of the Christian, the fate of the Christian in Syria and globally in the Middle East is at stake in that as well. And of course the Christians are siding with the government at the moment, with the official government. So it's much more complex, and I don't see, and we'll see that lingering on, and it's really hard to say what's going to be the outcome at this point.
Siding with the government or staying on the sidelines. The Gulf states, led by Saudi Arabia, this Tuesday pulling out of an Arab League observer mission to Syria. We get the sense as well that the battle lines are sort of crystallizing in the wider region around what's going on inside Syria.
I think definitely that the Arab League is getting angrier and angrier and more concerned, and they're bringing their concerns this week to the Security Council at the United Nations, and they're saying we need a transition period, we need Bashar al-Assad to give over to his vice president. But the Syrians say no, obviously, and part of the reason, like Judah was saying, that it's going to be protracted is because we're stuck in the Security Council with Russia and China, who won't allow any Security Council resolution to be passed. So there's not a lot of movement from the outside to do anything. And, after the experience of Libya, I think that there's an enormous amount of hesitancy to do anything else there. And I think also Assad knows that. Assad looks over at what's gone on in Egypt, that Mubarak sort of stepped down, and now we see where Mubarak is, and we look at Libya, what happened with Libya. So he's going to be tough till the very end, and he has nothing to lose by continuing to fight strongly.
Marcus Mabry, we know that at the Security Council, you were mentioning Russia a moment ago. Right now, they're firmly saying we're not going to sign on to anything that says that Assad has to go. But we all know that at the Security Council, it's the horse trading is going on. What will be the tipping point?
I'm not sure what the tipping point will be, because it's been extraordinary. In the last few months, just a few months ago, Russia actually had made some signs that they'd actually said some negative things toward Syria, and it actually suggested that maybe they would be willing to make a deal in the Security Council to actually get behind something, and then they pulled back to return to a more intransigent position. So I'm not quite sure what the Russians want here, and the real problem, I think, for the Europeans and the Americans is that because of the mess, because of the sectarian mess inside Syria, because of the Christian mess, because of the tribal mess, it's not clear at all that there is a stable outcome for the West. If you thought what's happening in Egypt or what's happening in Libya, or are unstable regimes trying to find a transition point to more stability, what would happen in Syria would be worse than we're seeing in any of those other states. So from the Western point of view, it's not terribly clear what would be a wanted outcome in a short period of time that would not be even more unstable than what we have today, as horrible and bloody as it is. And I think you made a good point, Francois, about these journalists who are all kind of going undercover. Over the next few days, I think we'll see more and more and more real reporting coming out of Syria, and I think that it's going to be bloodier and more terrible because these journalists are all actually witnessing these things now. And I think that's going to actually increase the pressure in all the Western capitals to actually find some kind of solution that they want to work toward. Because right now, this kind of unstable stasis is not a comfortable place for anyone to be.
Just even develop that point a bit. The danger of a destabilized Syria. The risk of contagion is a lot greater than, for instance, in Egypt, which is there was the major security concern about the peace treaty with Israel, but it largely remains a self-contained instability. In Syria, you have Turkey, you have Iraq, you have Lebanon, you have northern Israel, and so if Syria fractures, the fallout and the repercussions spread throughout the region. The one thing I'd say though about the Security Council is that the fact that Morocco and the Arab League, Morocco will be presenting the resolution as the latest I heard. I'm not sure if that's still if that's changed in the meantime. But the fact that Morocco will be presenting the resolution and that the Arab League will be behind it makes it a lot more difficult for Russia to block it. Generally, in the Security Council, if the regional organization is really behind something, yeah, it's almost like a courtesy that the region gets the first say. And if Russia plays along or deals, China will probably too, because the Chinese don't like to be isolated in the Security Council. So there is the potential for something to move a little bit in the Security Council. The problem is, what do you want to happen? Because that's a whole.
I think what you're saying is really crucial, and it's also one thing you have to look at from a Syrian point of view. What can you hope for the future? If you are siding with the regime, you're siding because you've seen also what happened in Iraq. Syrian is a secular society. You go to Damascus, you can go in bars, you have a lot of things. These people have a lot of things at stake with that. They don't want to come, they've seen what happened in Baghdad. They've seen what Iraq is today. Because let's put it that way, Iraq is much less free today than it was in terms of women's rights, in terms of a number of things, than it wasn't even under Saddam. And the Syrian had to bear the burden of also welcoming a number of Iraqi refugees for quite some time. And they have this society, and some of them want to preserve that. They don't want to. They don't want to come in under
So the outcome a lot less certain than we thought. We're going to look at another hotspot, and it's an ally of Syria. The week beginning with the EU slapping oil sanctions on Iran over its nuclear program. This as US, French, and UK warships ignored Tehran's threats and returned to the Strait of Hormuz passage. The passage, by the way, for 1/3 of our planet's oil tankers. Now, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, the growing tension definitely on the agenda of speakers.
We are determined to prevent Iran from turning nuclear, and even the American president and European leaders have said that no option should be removed off the table, and Iran should be blocked from turning nuclear.
Now, it goes further. In a New York Times Magazine cover story, Ronan Bergman asks if Israel is going to bomb Iran. Key is how Washington reacts. He points to the transcript of a conversation that took place between Israeli and U.S. intelligence officials before the triggering of the 1967 Six-Day War. And in it, he writes, substitute Tehran for Cairo and Strait of Hormuz for Straits of Tehran, and it could have taken place this past week. Since 1967, the unspoken understanding that America should agree, at least tacitly, to Israeli military actions has been at the center of relations between the two countries. The question is, how much is one side beholden to the other in an election year in the United States?
The U.S. and Israel, you mean, in terms of a bombing? This is the big question. Even last year there were articles, I think, in the Atlantic Monthly, people pointed out saying the same thing. Ronan Bergman in the New York Times Magazine article is writing, this is the year where it might happen. This is the year where Israel might bomb Iran. But last year in the Atlantic Monthly, they said, this was the year. And so I think Israel, I don't know, Israel is serious, is prepared for it, but they're also trying to really push the agenda forward. I think that what they would really like is more sanctions, which they got this week from the EU, and they would like discussion, and they would like, that's what they're pushing for. On the other hand, they've said, even I think a week ago, that they would give America only 12 hours warning if they were in fact going to bomb, and I know that there are preparations, and that is they're just playing with both of those options.
Marcus, what's interesting in that article is also how the relationship between the U.S. and Israel has changed. Is today in a position where they can say no if they get that 12-hour warning?
Well, no, the U.S. can't stop it. And the reason it would be a 12-hour warning under Israeli calculations is that the U.S. wouldn't have time to stop it at that point. There'd be nothing the Obama administration could do to stop it from happening. Ehud Barak reacted incredibly negatively when he was presented with that parallel in the two conversations between before the '67 war and before today. He said the relationship is very different. The U.S. and Israel are much closer, he said today, actually, and much more respectful of each other's sovereignty. I think that's probably true. At the same time, there is skepticism, particularly in Israel, that the Obama administration is actually supportive of stopping Iran. There's a sense in Israel, and many people in Washington actually have the same sense, that the Obama administration has decided, as many people in the Bush administration before them decided, that Iran acquiring a nuclear capability is inevitable. That's going to happen. And what the Obama administration has decided, many people believe, is that the goal now is to prevent Iran from crossing another red line, which is the red line of actually making a weapon. That's again, the administration hasn't officially commented on that, but that's the Israeli fear. And there's a real sense in Israel, and as you said, Donna, we've heard this before, but what we're hearing now is that we're talking about 9 months. In 9 months, Israel will no longer have the capability to hit Iran to a point in which it would actually push back the day in which Iran acquires nuclear weapons. What I find shocking here is no one is saying will prevent Iran from ever acquiring nuclear weapons. No one's saying that. We're talking about a delay of maybe 2 or 3 years. And even within Israel, there's a huge fight over whether or not that delay is worth it.
Yeah. And another question is, would going over there and bombing, Iran facilities, would that be the answer, or is it to go in and assassinate, nuclear scientists, which is what they've been doing, or sending them faulty materials or worming their computers, stuff like that, which is a different way to delay it?
Well, one thing, though, the dirty little secret about an Israeli strike on Iran is that the Israelis don't have the capabilities to do the kind of long-term campaign that would be necessary to actually do any sort of damage, significant and considerable damage to the Iranian nuclear program without American support and participation. The idea that for the past few years, there's been talk about an Israeli strike similar to the one that took out the Iraqi nuclear reactor or the Syrian nuclear facility. That's not possible with the Iranian program because it's dispersed and it's already very hardened. It's not the kind of thing that one strike can take out. The Israelis could easily do a strike, but they wouldn't be able to, in the face especially of international pressure, in the face of potentially pressure from Washington, to do the kind of 3-week campaign that would be necessary, including cruise missile strikes and attacks on air defenses to make sure that there aren't half a dozen Israeli pilots paraded through Tehran. So the dirty little secret is that an airstrike isn't going to do it. And the Israelis can't do what it would take to really give
all on their own.
All on their own.
Okay, when we come back in the world this week, we're going to look at somebody who, at this point, seems all on his own. Nicolas Sarkozy, behind in the polls with less than 3 months to go before Election Day in this country. All right, we seem to be having